One of the biggest questions in AI right now is, as these things get super, super smart, how do we make sure they stay helpful and, more importantly, harmless? I mean, how can you possibly teach an AI ethics when you can't check every single decision it makes? So let's get into it.
Well, researchers over at a company called Anthropic have come up with a really fascinating solution. What if, instead of needing a human to constantly look over its shoulder, we could just give an AI a set of principles, like an ethical rulebook, and let it teach itself?
And yeah, this is the heart of the matter. This is what people in the field call the alignment problem, making sure an AI's goals stay aligned with our own. But the thing is, as AI gets exponentially more powerful, our ability to supervise it directly, well, there's just no way we can keep up.
To really get why this new idea is so cool, we first have to look at why the current method is kind of hitting a wall. Okay, so the way it's usually done today is with something called reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF. It's a powerful technique for sure, but it's basically a brute force approach. You have armies of human reviewers looking at thousands and thousands of AI responses, labeling them good or bad. It works, but wow, is it a massive bottleneck.
And this gets us to the real challenge, which the research paper calls scaling supervision. I mean, it's just not realistic. Imagine an AI making millions of decisions a second. Are we going to have a person check every single one? No way. We need a system that can actually scale. And this is where the new idea comes in. It's a really elegant solution that kind of flips the whole supervision model on its head.
So say hello to constitutional AI. The big idea is right there in the name. Instead of drowning the AI in tens of thousands of specific examples of what not to do, you just give it a short, simple list of principles to follow, a constitution. And that constitution becomes the guide for the AI to train itself.
And this quote from the original research paper just nails it. The breakthrough here is that the human job shifts from all that tedious labeling work to the much more high-level work of just defining the principles we want the AI to live by.
So how in the world does this actually work, right? How does a list of rules turn into a safer AI? Well, the whole process happens in two main phases. Okay, so phase one is this supervised learning stage, but the AI is supervising itself. First, an AI model that's helpful but not quite harmless yet spits out an answer to a tricky question. Then, and this is the magic part, it's prompted to critique its own response using one of the principles from the Constitution. And finally, it rewrites its answer based on its own feedback. It's kind of like a student writing an essay, proofreading it against the teacher's rules, and then writing a much better second draft. Let's look at a real example from the paper to make this concrete. A user asks how to hack their neighbor's Wi-Fi. The initial model, just trying to be helpful, gives them direct illegal advice. This is exactly the kind of thing we want to avoid.
But now, after critiquing its own response against the Constitution, which, has rules about not encouraging illegal stuff, the AI revises its answer. And the result is so much better. It's still helpful, but now it's also harmless and actually responsible.
This diagram shows you the whole ingenious process. So after that first phase where the AI learns to critique and revise its own work, it enters a second phase, and this is where it gets really clever. It basically starts generating its own training data. It creates two different responses, and then, using the Constitution as its guide, it decides which of the two is better. This creates this incredible feedback loop where the AI is constantly teaching itself to be more harmless, all without a human having to label every single choice. Okay, so this all sounds great in theory, right? But does it actually work in practice? Well, the results from the paper are pretty darn compelling. All right, this chart shows the payoff. Just think of it like a video game where you want the highest score. The vertical axis is harmlessness. Higher is better. The horizontal axis is helpfulness. Further to the right is better. So the perfect AI would be way up in that top right corner, being both incredibly helpful and totally harmless. Now let's see how they did. And here is the key breakthrough this chart shows. See, before, there was this really frustrating trade-off. To make an AI more harmless, you often had to make it dumber or less helpful. It would just get evasive. It was like a zero-sum game. But what the data showed is that constitutional AI breaks this trade-off. It lets the model become both more harmless and more helpful at the same time. It's a true win-win, what economists call a Pareto improvement. And this just brilliantly illustrates one of the biggest benefits. Older models, when you made them harmless, would just become evasive. Ask a tough question, and they'd throw their hands up and say, sorry, can't talk about that. But the CII models, they actually learn to engage with tricky topics thoughtfully. They explain why a request might be harmful instead of just refusing to answer. And that makes them so much more useful. So let's zoom out for a second, because this isn't just a clever technical trick. This is a fundamental step toward building AI systems that we can actually, trust.
So why does this matter so much? Well, for one, it solves that scaling problem by having AIs help supervise other AIs. Second, it makes the whole process way more transparent. Instead of some black box trained on a million human clicks, the AI's values are right there in a human-readable constitution. And third, like we just saw, it creates better, more helpful assistants that actually explain themselves. Ultimately, this research really points toward a future where we can build AI that is not only insanely capable, but also demonstrably aligned with the principles we choose to give it. It's a powerful way to make our supervision more effective. And that brings us to the final and maybe the most critical question of all. This technology makes it possible to encode our values into an AI with a simple document. The technical problem might be on its way to being solved, but it opens up an even bigger societal one. Who decides what principles go into that constitution? That's something we're all going to have to figure out together.